and welcome to Down the Alley. This is PMAC.
And Ted T.S. Barides.
And Katie.
DTA, welcome back. It is crazy. It's long overdue. We have so much to tackle. But first, Ted, who is back with DTA Nation this upcoming season?
DTA is proud to be sponsored by Old Southern Barbecue for another season. If you're looking for smoking good deals on mouth-watering brisket, fall off the bone ribs, and delicious sides, check out one of their 4 metro locations or visit them online at oldsouthernbarbecue.com. And make sure to tell them that DTA sent you.
DTA sent you. That's the big movement. We know DTA Nation is eating there. You guys are texting me every week. I'm going to grad parties, and Old Southern Barbecue is feeding the people. So just let them know. Let them know. They want to know. They already know, but remind them that DTA sent you. We appreciate everything they do, and we're excited about the upcoming year with them. So many different directions we could go from here. We've got an unreal interview here coming up. Can't wait to meet them. But how's everyone's off season? Where are we? Where are we at?
All I'm
Where are the
thinking about is a
vibes?
corn muffin. We'd be remiss if a corn muffin top. We would be remiss if we didn't add that to the ad, because I actually was thinking about those today and how I could really go for some cornbread muffins from there.
I made chili yesterday.
Ooh.
And with some leftover brisket that did not a section of the brisket that was a little overdone. Still
was
kinda...
this a homemade brisket? I didn't hear about a brisket.
Okay, well,
on
we
Chestnut
gotta
Drive
like
here.
jump back a moment, because yesterday was pinnacle chili day.
Yeah, no, I know.
So did the spirit just move you and you're like, God, I want some chili?
There was a brisket was on sale at Hy-Vee. So I got like a 14 pounder for like $50 or $60. So it was a solid deal. And I'm like, all right, I can swing that, because I know I'll probably screw it up, because I haven't done a lot of briskets personally, and they're a little bit harder to do. So I'm like, all right, okay, I'll do this, and did it. The overnight low and slow thing. I haven't figured out how to do it right on my pellet smoker.
Was it just like tough?
It just yeah, there was a lot wrong with it. So it was not very good, but I was able to salvage a lot of it and chop it up into like cubes, and I put it in a chili yesterday.
Beans or no beans?
Beans.
I love like heavy beans. Like I'll put like 3 cans of beans in my chili.
Yeah, yesterday was chili. And I guess the reason I'm going there, or I went there, was we did make cornbread with it, but it would have been great to have muffin tops from Old Southern, but it just wasn't in the cards to get over there. But other than that, yeah, it's really great to have them back for another year. They have been great supporters of our show. It's awesome to work with them, but also just get to know them as a company. And they're a family business. They're supporters of lacrosse. They're supporters of Minnesota lacrosse. So it's a great fit, and we're excited to have them. Yeah, it's been when was our last episode? June 15th or something like that. It was like right after the state tournament, or it was the day of the state championship, or the day before. A lot has happened. Any, I guess, quick remarks about the high school season? Like anything like in your mind that you're like, man, I can't believe that happened, or that this team or that team, like anything, now that we've had a few months to like get over it a little bit. Was there something interesting to you, or something you're excited leading into next year for high school lacrosse?
My reflection really culminates at the state championship game, obviously. And I think time heals all wounds. What sticks out in my head was like Lakeville like needed to win that game, Lakeville South, with the team that they had I mean, they left their mark, specifically those starters and that group of girls. And Tori Cheetah was on and just kind of talked about how long they've been playing with each other. That's a special team. Like, that team, I think, up there in my head now is, I think, going to go down as like the EP girls that had the runs, the Blake girls that had the run that they did. Like, and to look back at the last couple of years of that team, I mean, that's a stellar performance for those girls, and something really, really special for them to be a part of. And I think that's just, it still sticks out in me. I mean, I think about that game every single day still. Like, I don't know if I have nothing else to think about, but
they were definitely a team of, team of destiny, if that's what you want to call it, or, obviously just star-studded across the board. PMAC, anything resonates with you from the season, or something you're looking forward to next year?
No, yeah, like last season, if we're gonna stick on like kind of towards the end, just to touch, Katie did a great dive on that last game, but the rain of the final day of of the season, weather was great like all year, and then just the monsoon started, which we had a lot of rain this year. The summer is pretty rainy summer, but that state championship day, an absolute monsoon.
Yep.
The pictures from that, from the boys and girls game, it was kind of crazy. The fact that they played through it and played that day, kind of wild. Looking forward, I've got a list. I've got a list of topics and storylines. Not all going to be on this podcast, but there's different things that I'm gonna definitely bring up as we go here. This fall and all off season. But if I had to pick one storyline, I feel like there's going to be some movement. I feel like the last couple of years, it's been maybe, the same couple of teams in the mix. Are some of these teams going to move in the rankings? Is there going to be some different teams in the mix, as it's been the same few the last couple of seasons? Is this the year? Is 2025 the year, the season, post COVID, that we kind of get a different champion?
Now that you both were talking about, well, specifically Katie kind of talking about Lakeville South, I find it interesting. It just occurred to me that this past season's two champions, Benilde boys, Lakeville South girls, were massively upset in semis the year before. Because you could argue Lakeville South girls, Benilde boys in 2023 were the quote unquote team to beat, or whatever.
Yeah,
like
100%.
And Prior Lake beat Benilde boys, and Benilde girls beat Lakeville South girls to go on to the state final game. And both of those teams then rebounded, came back, and won state the next year. So that's interesting that it happened on both sides, girls and boys. And I do agree with you about movement, and always wondering kind of what's going to happen. For a few years there, South Suburban Conference was dominating, just like top 10 type programs. A lot of teams in the final. In the section finals. I mean, in 2023, 3 of the final 4 teams were South Suburban teams. But last year, the Lake Conference out kind of rebounded as maybe once the power conference. They had a lot of teams they were all beating each other, so nobody ever really knew who was really the best out of that group. But once playoffs came, they were all battle tested, and a lot of those teams did really well in playoffs. So the Lake Conference last year took a step forward, and rumor has it that Maple Grove is going to enter the Lake Conference. That will be an interesting
Speaking on conference talks and comparing conferences, the Discord, in there, I opened it up first time in months, and there's a couple weeks ago a message in there comparing the Lake Conference, comparing they're the SEC of Minnesota lacrosse, SEC, college football. You know, we're in college football season, and I thought about it throughout the day. Is that a fair comparable? What are your thoughts on that? As early on, I'm like, oh yeah, you know, that's cute, fine. You know, the South Suburban can be the Big Ten, but I almost feel like it's flipped.
I know nothing about football, but that was my very instinctual reaction, was that I would say the SEC is the South Suburban and the Lake Conference is the Big Ten. If I had to just throw something to the wall and see what sticks, in my opinion, it seemed backwards.
Yeah.
But I don't, like, again, I don't really watch a lot of football at all. So
Ted, what are your thoughts? You know, the Lake Conference, maybe it's a little more flashy like the SEC. Maybe the South Suburban's a little more Big Ten, Midwest, you know. I don't I could go either way. I could go either way. I see both sides to this. What are your thoughts?
That is a great question. I think I buy it. I buy it as messaged. I think the Lake Conference has some big time rich tradition public schools that have been successful in athletics for a long time, and a lot of teams that I think have the resources and the athletes to, you know, to be they're going to be a good team every single year. Now, whether they go on a run and win it all, that's a different story. But I see a lot of, I think that flashy comparison, like, you know, skill, speed, that kind of thing. Whereas maybe the teams in the South Suburban would be a little more gritty, a little more physical, still very good, but a different style of lacrosse. You know, I don't know. I think it kind of depends on the day, but I think last year I would buy Lake Conference SEC, South Suburban Big Ten.
I can live with it. I can live with it. I was going a little bit back and forth on it. But no, I can live with that. And I thought it was an interesting conversation.
You know, we have a great guest coming up. We have a few minutes before he joins us. I want to touch a little bit on this year, fall ball. A lot of teams kicking off fall ball, both at the club level, the high school level, the youth level. For me specifically, I've been seeing a lot of commitment posts, girls and boys, Minnesota players, lots of action lately on the recruiting scene. I'm not going to obviously go down the list up specifically, but I feel like this year, a lot of schools and levels and new schools have entered the mix. Like, just across the board, I felt like it's been a good recruiting year for Minnesota kids. What are you guys' thoughts on that? Like, do you feel like there's been more posts about commitments and stuff?
That's what I was going to say. I was going to just say the sheer number of them and just like positivity. It seemed like there's kind of been the switch of like, committing is committing, and that's great. Whereas like, I feel like in the past, it's like, well, I'm not going to commit to this, you know, whatever. I'm not going to do it at all. It seems like there's kind of been the wave of like, it's all over the board, and just the sheer number, I think, is what I've noticed for sure.
Is it just to touch on this, another Prior Lake player committed to Maryville, but not a boy. So, you know, a lot of PLU talk going to Maryville, Prior Lake. Yep. Now there's a girl. So what is going on? I don't know. I know we got somebody in the waiting room. We can let them in. There's gonna be a lot more recruiting talk. I got a whole. I think it took up my whole Google Drive gigabytes.
That should be be like a whole episode, because honestly, they all deserve a shout out. Like, we should go down the list.
Agreed.
The source sent us every commitment across maybe the nation. It was a whole document. I don't have any gigabytes. I'm out of memory.
We have our guest in the waiting room ready to come on, But before we introduce them, remember to check out oldsouthernbarbecue.com to grab sauces, rubs, merch, and more. Use DTA 15 to save 15% off your order. Well, let's let them in.
What's going on?
It's going. You guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we can hear you.
How we doing?
Doing good, doing good. I'm gonna let Ted do most of this interview because I slid in your DMs on the down the alley, Instagram. No reply, and then Ted somehow finds your email, does some phone call. I don't know what Ted does, but Ted gets a reply and I don't. So I'm gonna kick it over. You and Ted can have a conversation. I'm just gonna stay off to the side here and see where this conversation goes.
Yeah, Jack, welcome. We are with Jack VanOverbeke. I think a lot of your friends call you Vano. I don't know if we're on that level yet. Maybe after this episode, we can start calling you that. A quick rundown here of Jack for those few people that are listening that don't know him. Benil St. Margaret's class of 2020, in his career, 75 goals, 105 assists for 180 points in only 3 seasons. Because of COVID, didn't play his senior year. We'll talk more about that. 2019 All-American, first team All-State. 2018 honorable mention All-State. And he went to High Point, Division I lacrosse, 60 games played, 89 goals, third all-time with 95 assists, and fourth all-time with 185 points. Last year, you just destroyed the Syracuse Orange with 5 goals and 3 assists. Had a day against them. And A10 second team all conference last year, and then headed off to the pros. PLL Utah Archers, first professional goal was a BTB, not a big deal. And your second professional goal is a game winner in overtime. And you just won the championship. So I feel like you've done it all at this point. Very decorated player, one of the best I've seen personally. We're really excited to have you on. So welcome.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I know. I remember being in college and listening to episodes back there, especially the Gus Bell one's probably the most notable one that I was listening to. But yeah, to say I'm a listener of the pod is good, and then also excited to be on it. So thank you guys for having me.
We usually kind of just start with, what got you started in lacrosse. It seems like with Minnesota kids, it's not something they just do right away, but is like, what was your journey getting into the game?
Yeah, so I played baseball growing up, basically until 3rd grade. Well, I have 2 older brothers as well who played at Rosemount. But as soon as lacrosse had gotten to Minnesota, they basically jumped all over it, and they were on like it was like Jacks and a couple of those really OG like travel lacrosse teams, and like I think it was like Apple Valley, Rosemount, and some other like Eastview maybe were all together, and there was like barely even enough to field 2 teams. But as soon as I had like picked up a stick and kind of watched them get better and better, like whether it was like the first week of them playing or not, I basically just fell more and more in love with it because we were playing baseball at the time, and it wasn't really fast paced. I was the youngest of 2 older brothers, so I kind of wanted to do exactly what they did anyways. Basically, as soon as lacrosse got to Minnesota, I picked up the stick. Both my older brothers wanted me to continue playing baseball until I went to Cooperstown because they had both done that and really liked it. But I couldn't really keep myself playing baseball for another year or 2. So that's initially how I got into it. Yeah, I think overall the sport has grown a ton, especially in Minnesota, but around the entire United States. But overall, I think we're seeing a lot more kids playing lacrosse as their first sport, especially in the Midwest, which is awesome.
Yeah, for sure. So you said you started playing baseball and switched to lacrosse. Did you play any other sports growing up?
Yeah, I was the only one of my brothers that played hockey at like an actual level, like a associate level. I played hockey, baseball, and like football were like my main 3 when I was younger. A little bit of like I basically played every sport, but I'd say the ones that I genuinely liked playing were hockey, baseball, and football. And then kind of once I got to middle school, it was like just football, just lacrosse, and then a little bit of basketball in the mix there. But for the most part, once I got to high school, I played football my freshman year, but basically wanted to kind of just only focus on lacrosse. And that's when I kind of saw like love shift from preferring football or preferring lacrosse. And, seeing what my brothers did in college and how far lacrosse can take you is obviously it's different when I'm looking at it now, but in my shoes then, I would have had no idea where I'd be in the position I am today. But overall, I just kind of dove right into lacrosse as soon as they all took it up.
Yeah, when did lacrosse become a real passion? Like when, number one sport, obviously being a multi-sport guy, making the jump over to Benilde from Rosemount. I played against your older brothers.
Yeah.
Any rivalry there? Older public school guys, younger brother going private. Like what's going on there? How's that going? How's that, at Thanksgiving dinner?
They were stoked for me. I wanted to, obviously, I love Rosemount and I wanted to play high school lacrosse at, Rosemount basically my entire youth, and seeing both my older brothers go through there and kind of getting beat by Eden Prairie and Prior Lake most of the time when it came down to it. Chanhassen and East Ridge was pretty good back then as well. But no bad blood at all. They're pumped for me to go to Benilde and get an opportunity because they had been coached by Rob Horn as well, with Minnesota Elite and all that. So they kind of knew his prowess as a coach. But no bad blood at all. They're very excited for me and how my lacrosse career has turned out. So
how was it, going to Benilde? What was did you go there as a freshman? Was that your first year
yeah.
there? Jumping on the field. I've been on the other sideline against Rob Horn. What was that transition like? In those first couple of seasons, you started making an impact, pretty early in your high school career.
Yeah, it was great. One of the hardest things was I still lived in Apple Valley when I was a freshman at Benilde, so the commute and travel was brutal. But other than that, I mean, every other experience I'd had there has been overwhelmingly positive. And to see the support now, once I was in college and then now out of it, it's still insane. Like there's a guy, Mike Jeremiah, who's worked there for I don't even know how long, but like basically 2 lifetimes. And to see how connected he is with the community of people who's graduated from Benilde, and to see that, there's people like Mike Charles that are still around the community, is awesome. But with lacrosse specifically, I'd say the biggest thing when I first stepped foot in the school would probably be the senior class and the junior class when I got there. Bunch of names I could say, like Karsten Swenson, Eric Weber now works at High Point as their strength and conditioning coach for the men's lacrosse team and women's volleyball. So it was kind of pretty crazy to see, full circle how I had initially threw his name in a hat with Coach Torpy, and when we had lost our strength and conditioning coach, I mean, I knew he was in the realm. So I'm stoked for him. But yeah, seniors, juniors, and basically the entire community there is probably the easiest thing that I could say. But whether it's lacrosse or, academics or faith, whatever you want to write it down to, I'm very happy with Benilde and how that all turned out with stuff on the field. I'd say I couldn't have personally got coached by a better duo, and the people that they surround themselves with were top tier. So
Yeah, we're hoping to, pull a couple of Horn or Sean stories out of you, but one of your first goals, a game win, one of your first PLL goals, a game winner. Unorthodox. Well, your first two goals were unorthodox, BTB, and then you do a kind of a shovel backhand shot. What would Horn do in overtime if you pulled that? I don't know if Horn is a big backhand in overtime type of guy. Maybe I'm wrong. But that's just my assumption.
yeah. I don't know. I mean, there were definitely some plays in high school I can remember vividly, like shooting the ball. I'd like to, like back in the day, I would always go low to high most of the time, especially my freshman and sophomore year. I was a little bit more of an off-ball guy in the offense, so it was basically just catch and pull it whenever I could. But as I kind of grew up and matured, it never really made sense to me, like the whole shoot high to low, use the ground, all that stuff. But that's like the biggest thing that I would always get kind of drilled into me is like change up shot selection and all that. And, if you force the crease, throwing it behind the back pass and it doesn't work, then you're going to hear it. But if it does work, it'll be the happiest guy in the world, right? So, I mean, I don't really know what direction he would go. I'd say off the top of the head, he probably wouldn't be super happy if it doesn't go. But at the end of the day, I feel like he's he's pretty good with creativity and allowing, players to play for the most part. I think my first goal of high school actually was against St. Louis Park at home, and it was offhanded, but it wasn't anything crazy. And then later on in that game, I had caught one, went around the world, and like his reaction on the bench was still like vividly, it's in my brain. Like I can watch it on like the stadium screen or whatever, but I can remember him like looking over at Sean or whoever's on the bench and just like nodding his head, which was pretty funny.
Um, Kind of transitioning. Obviously, you had a decorated career at Benilde, but you said like once you got into high school, you kind of started to say like lacrosse is what I want to do. It's kind of my focus. What was your recruiting process like? Obviously, you're one of the handful of kids that have gone to play at the Division I level. It's not very common. So what was that like to kind of get through that and get to High Point?
Yeah, it was pretty slow. I was one of the weird classes where they had just changed the whole ruling to what it is now, where like when I was younger, like eighth grade, I think through probably we were the first class ever, I want to say, where we had like a year window where we couldn't talk to coaches until junior or September 1st.
Yep.
So it was up until the end of my freshman year where technically you could commit and talk to coaches and there was no ruling on it. So a lot of the kids, especially the ones from out east, had already committed, and a lot of the teams really didn't need any other kids. So when it became September 1st, I hadn't had obviously nobody talking to me before that. So then that year happened. I didn't really have anybody September 1 talk, but the first school that had reached out to me was Air Force. I'd went out. That was my first official visit as well. I want to say that was the start of my junior year. That went well. I could definitely see myself going there, but it was a little bit much with on a service academy and how brutal it is your first couple of years. So I initially kind of stepped away from Air Force, Army, Navy as a whole. Basically played my entire junior year. Didn't really have anybody else reaching out to me. And then that was the first summer where Project Midwest was a travel team with Coach Horn and Andy Kay out of Missouri, and they put together a hell of a squad. And basically, that kind of opened the doors with recruiting and all that stuff. And it definitely picked up a lot faster than I thought it was going to. It was Project Midwest, and then it was the Under Armour All America team for the Midwest. And I want to say we had the best team in like ever for the Midwestern standard. First time I think we ever beat like Connecticut or played Baltimore to a decent game, and stuff like that. So that was huge. First time I think we ever had a winning record, which helped. But basically every coach under the sun was at that tournament. So after that, it was basically, I think my top five came down to Boston University, Utah, High Point, obviously Richmond, Air Force, and then a couple other schools. But those were the five that I took my official visits to. And obviously ended up going with High Point. I think the reason for that was just the relationship I had built with Coach Torpy and the rest of his staff when I was there. Another thing that was kind of weird was I toured all these schools in the summer, so none of the students were there, and I didn't get to see practice, day in the life, really anything at any of these schools besides Richmond. There's a couple guys there for summer school, but it wasn't exactly how life would be on a campus as a typical visit goes. So I kind of I fell in love with High Point the second I got on campus, which obviously, I mean, any of you guys been there?
No, all I hear about is the steakhouse. How many, like, were you a regular at the steakhouse?
Yeah.
Is this a weekly thing? Is it more than a weekly? Like, what's going on? What's
Yeah.
the order? Give me the full breakdown of the steakhouse.
Yeah. So basically just to finish the first question. Set up foot on campus. It was awesome. Loved it. It was raining that day. So like the worst day ever, but ended up going with High Point. Very
Also,
happy.
what time is this 2020 yet?
This is the summer of my junior year going into my senior year.
Okay, so that's why there
So I
wasn't
don't know
anyone
what
on
year.
campus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know if you were doing that. Makes sense. That
Yeah,
makes
this
sense.
was pre-COVID, but
Yep,
it was
cool.
just during the
Cool.
summer.
The summer 2019.
Got
Yeah.
it. Got it.
Yes. So yeah, ended up deciding to commit to High Point right before the start of my senior year. But yeah,
Were you in the steakhouse when you committed? Like they just brought you to the steakhouse,
they showed
you're
me
having dinner. They're like, yeah, this is part of your meal package.
it.
Sounds good, coach. I'm coming here.
Before we talk about
I
the
wish.
steakhouse, you said the recruiting was really slow, but this really was like the course of like a school year.
It was slow until like
It
that
wasn't.
summer, essentially. Yeah. So like
Okay.
after my
Okay.
junior year, September 1st, and we played the entire year my junior year, and then basically didn't have much until, like with
The
Minnesota
summer,
being,
the Project Midwest.
yeah,
Yeah.
with Minnesota
Okay.
being really weird in the state tournament, basically
Yep.
going so far in the summer. It was like state tournament, 3 days later, I'm trying out for the Under Armour All-America team, all
Yep.
that stuff. So quick turnaround with all of it. But yeah, it was slow until that summer where it picked up. But yeah, with the steakhouse, I had looked at it at High Point. Like we walked in and obviously nobody was there. It was just like kind of like, yeah, well, you can come here once a week. We had like the meal plan we had. It's a little bit different now, I think, but it's you get 17 meal swipes a week, and there's like magic meals and regular meals, and then you get one specialty meal, which it was prime, which was what the steakhouse was called. And then they also have
Hold on. What's in these
What's a
a
magic meal?
magic
What's
meal?
a
What's a
magic
magic meal?
meal?
What's it?
yeah,
Magic meal.
magic meals was like Chick-fil-A, Starbucks. Like we had a couple other nicer spots on campus that were like,
That's included in your meal plan?
yeah, it was nice.
Damn, I picked the wrong
Yeah.
school.
And then basically the 11 other meals that were just normal meal swipes is just like the cafeteria or like dining, regular dining spots. But they were all great. But you get one like specialty meal, which was prime, or it's gonna sound bad when I say it, but they built a new stadium for the or arena for the basketball team. And in there is Nito Quabain like conference center where it's like just a giant ballroom and his office and all that stuff. And then on the right side, there's like a hotel where donors obviously would stay. And then also it's pretty hard and expensive to get, I think, a spot in there, but parents can stay there if they'd like to. And the wait list isn't the easiest thing to deal with, but there's that. And then there's also Aloe, which is a Mediterranean style kitchen, Greek Mediterranean style food, which was
Sounds so
also
good
on
right
the
now.
same level as the steakhouse. And then my senior year, they had built a graduate student housing area, basically a graduate student and then freshman, where on the top floor there was a hibachi spot, which was technically a specialty meal. So there's
How many times did the whole team just, yeah.
it was great.
Hibachi's so
with
fun.
foreign stuff, you got that once a week. And my buddy Braden Maye, he would all like because it refreshes at midnight, like Sunday or something for the week.
That's
and you can
dangerous. It's like your
He
your
would-
your ATM.
yeah,
You can't get money out.
he would always stay up and get a reservation for the boys. My freshman, sophomore, and then junior year, which was awesome.
Do you have to dress up at these places? Yes,
So
like
they
like
pitch it,
a
yeah,
suit or like
they
a
pitch it
shirt.
to you when you're a freshman is like a workshop, like a
Yeah. Yeah.
business dinner workshop, which
Yep.
for the most part they do a good job of that. But once you get older, it's kind of like you can show up in business casual stuff. But
Sure.
the first time we went, we were like all decked out in suits and like intimidated to walk in there and on our best
Yeah.
behavior.
No, the
Once you're-
concept is the coolest thing on any college campus. I'm convinced, unless you can convince me otherwise. Unless
There was-
somebody
yeah.
has a better idea, I think it's a genius idea.
Yeah, no, it's like it's good use for everything because Nito can go there and bring out donors and all that. So he's the president of the campus. So we would see him
Okay.
in there
I was
every
like, should I know him?
Yeah, and I
Cool.
mean, I say it so loosely and expect
Yeah.
people to know just because
Yeah.
I was in the environment for 4 years. But yeah, it's great because you get to
Cool.
learn stuff, and there's like little note cards they would hand out, and you just like a little business tip or something.
What did you
But-
get at the steakhouse?
Yeah, the favorite you would order obviously entree, like appetizer, entree, and then dessert. But typically, I'd go with like the mashed potato soup, like baked potato soup.
Ooh.
It's pretty good. That or there was good grilled spinach or not grilled spinach, grilled Brussels sprouts, which were good. And then other than that, I'd probably just go with like the New York strip steak, which was always great. There's
How do you like it done?
medium rare, of course. And then for dessert, you get like a tiramisu or chocolate torte, whatever it is. But there's a whole
That's
bunch.
my favorite.
That was like my go-to.
I was waiting for it.
It was great stuff.
Sounds so good right now.
It
To
does.
get back on the lacrosse talk here, obviously going from your junior year, you commit, have great summer. jumping to 2020, which, everyone kind of had a crazy year in different ways. How did the 2020 lost season, what did that look like for you? Did Benil try to do anything? Were you doing virtual workouts? And what was that transition then from that season, kind of losing your senior year, which is a big development year, then going to High Point?
Yeah, I mean, definitely wasn't ideal. I think everybody that was in high school at the time, especially the 2020 class, and like all the guys I'd played summer lacrosse growing up with, were probably the most bummed about it. Just with, I mean, that's supposed to be like the best year of high school, and I hadn't won a state championship in my entire high school career. So like that was obviously the biggest thing circled on my calendar and on my radar. So obviously to lose the opportunity to do that was probably the biggest hit I took from it. I think personally, when you're looking at it like in the moment, like I was pretty stoked when school was canceled and I thought we were getting 2 weeks off like everybody else. But, once reality had set in where it's like, all right, well, they're not playing all these sports, it's like, all right, well, this might happen, right? And you always kind of try to keep hope in your brain. But, once final word got out that we weren't going to have a season, it was kind of like initially like, well, all right, well, how do we like somehow work around the MSHL and like agree as a senior class? I don't know. There's crazy things you think about that it just obviously would never happen. Um, but as a young kid, it definitely hurt a lot more than it does now. Like in hindsight, there's nothing we could do about it. And I've kind of like, I understand, like in hindsight, we probably could have played the season, but in reality, like nobody knew what was going on. And for them to make a decision and potentially harm young kids, like I think overall they probably made the smart, safe decision. But overall, yeah, I mean, like bummed I lost my senior year. Obviously bummed I couldn't play with, my team and be coached by Rob and Sean my last year. So in terms of what we were doing, it was like a bunch of Zoom calls, and we had like winter dome practices for the most part because we tried to keep it as normal as possible. And then once it happened, I believe it was in March. Once it happened in March, we were kind of just like, all right, well, hopefully we go back to school in 2 weeks. If not, it's going to be pretty hard to get the season, started up and then actually continued. But for the most part, just obviously it sucks to lose any year of your life, especially in your senior year of lacrosse. So
Yeah, the 2020 class, um, I think you guys all that was a really great class of players and kids, like you mentioned, guys you played summer lacrosse with, and just across the board. Um, and it really is a shame that, you know, you guys didn't get to kind of see that out in your senior year, but kind of looking over the last few, like specifically kind of like last year, a little bit in the college ranks, like yourself and a lot of kids in that 2020 class had great college careers.
yeah,
I think you guys would have, like if you would have played 2020 and COVID wouldn't have happened, you guys still would have had great college careers. But there may be like subconsciously, do you think maybe there was a little bit of like it kind of got you to college like hungry, like maybe a little hungrier, or more so have perspective of like, hey, this could be ripped away from me, so I better live life to the fullest and give my best every day. And like, do you think there was some subconscious impact there? Because like it's not just you who's had a great career from that 2020 class. There's a lot
yeah,
of kids.
oh yeah, yeah. No, I definitely think that's part of it too. And initially when I read the question prompt, I was going to bring that up and say it probably made all of us a little bit hungrier, especially when you get to college and just the real world in general. But 100%, I remember like COVID, obviously now it feels like you blinked and it was over. But in the moment, those were some of the longest days probably ever, that you just wake up, you're in your house, you're not really doing anything, and then you go to sleep and do it all over again for however long it was, right? But 100%, like when we were allowed to go outside and do all that stuff, I was immediately out there shooting or getting the guys together and trying to do whatever we could in preparation for college and just getting together again, even if they weren't playing college lacrosse. But 100%, I think anything that stings that much and is ripped away from you, like you had said, it's going to make you a little bit hungrier for the next opportunity you get.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, man, yeah, you said it great. I think it impacted you and a lot of people in that class. I kind of want to move forward, like discuss the jump from being a Benilde. I mean, you're the guy at Benilde. They're one of a couple, right? You're a top 5 or 6 player in your graduation class in the state. So I'm not saying things came easy to you, but you're used to being the guy, right? And you get to college, discuss that jump from high school to college on the lacrosse field.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that was noticeable for me is obviously speed of the game. I feel like every single jump I've made, whether it's middle school, high school, college, and now professional, is just the speed of the game gets so much, faster. And then also everybody is good. Like, you look at every college roster and there's nobody on the roster that doesn't belong there. So essentially, every player that is on any college lacrosse roster was probably the best player of their high school, if not top 5, like you had mentioned. And that's always going to breed obviously more competition. And all these people obviously don't not want to be playing lacrosse. Like they're there to play lacrosse and not sit on the sideline for any length of their career. So overall compete level, hungriness, and then speed of the game and skill were the biggest things I had noticed. I think one of the things that's a little bit overlooked in high school, which just being around Benilde practices, and college practices now, where it's like a lot of the stuff, just because I think it's numbers wise that you can't do at high school practice than what you could do in college practice. Like we had 60 guys on a roster, so like we could scrimmage any day we wanted, and we could also do like some of the most brutal ground ball drills ever, right? And then in 20 minutes we're gonna go out and do the exact same thing or whatever, right? After we slow it down. So I think overall, like intensity level at high school practice is nowhere near what it's like in college. And I'm a little bit, maybe it's different at other schools, but I'm only speaking from my experience at High Point with Coach Torpy. He's a absolute psychopath in the best way possible. And Coach Horn, I love him to death, but his practice and all that stuff was a little bit different than what it was at High Point.
Yeah.
A little bit more like, all right, chill, like we're here to play lacrosse, like unwind, like we love the game. And then it was when you get to college, it was like, all right, like rip a guy's face off and get the ground ball and score.
Horn
Um,
didn't bring in like Navy SEALs and run you guys through workouts like Tufts or
no, it wasn't. We have had a couple Navy SEALs that had graduated from the program, but luckily we never had any of those guys come back. We had Coach Torpy to deal with, where a lot of the alumni and seniors my freshman year were like, oh, like he's gone soft. Like you guys don't do half the stuff we did when we were freshmen. And with some of the stories I heard, like maybe that's true, but overall, I remember my freshman year, my sophomore year, like that had been, some of the hardest days of my life for sure. I remember like walking, like after one practice where basically we had gotten in trouble like the weekend before doing whatever. And it was like the first week of my sophomore year. And it was just like, all right, like we already have been through some pretty hard practices my freshman year, but it was a little bit easier with COVID and stuff. Whereas like anything you did, you basically got in trouble from the school. So you had to tell coach, and he was like, all right, well, there's some things like a little out of your hands right now because anything is like a violation of student conduct. But my sophomore year is basically like everything was normal. We tried to act like that with the school at least. And they were like, all right, like you guys are fine. Like we're going to try to have as normal of a life post COVID as possible, which was great. But then again, like if you're gonna mess up over the weekend and make a decision that's gonna hurt Monday, you're gonna have to tell coach about it. So that was one of those practices, and we basically ran the entire time, but just walking to class after showering in the locker room, like just like what am I doing right now? And then I had to sit through class and just like I'm half dead the entire day. But I mean, long story short, I think speed of the game is probably the biggest thing, physicality, and then also just intensity level.
You're a pretty big guy, like, pretty athletic guy. Um, and you talked about some of like just those brutal compete drills at the college level. I remember going to watch in person my first Division I lacrosse game. It was Marquette was hosting Providence College. And so
Mhm.
like, you know, two like middle tier Division I programs, solid programs, but not like the upper echelon. And the Providence College team walked out of the locker room, and there is just some absolute mutants that came out. And I was like, holy crap, I would never want to be anywhere near a ground ball with any of these
Yeah.
humans. Did you kind of feel that? I mean, you're like I said, you're a big athletic guy, but there's just some absolute dudes at
Oh,
that
yeah.
level.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're a freshman, I think that's when like you're kind of a deer in headlights and you're drinking out of a fire hose. Where I was like, we're getting in the weight room a little bit, but in high school I wasn't really a huge lifter, and I wasn't as big as I was now, that's for sure. When you get there, there's fifth year seniors, sometimes sixth year seniors with COVID. So I was basically there in the first couple drills, and obviously like that's when he wants to set the tone, Coach Sharpie. So we do a drill called pressure cooker, which is probably like, I mean, I used to think it was the most unenjoyable drill of all time, but as you kind of grow up, it's like, all right, this drill is awesome because you can kind of just do whatever you want within reason. And like basically everyone's on the soccer circle where the face-off dot is. And it's like that clip of the Navy drill, basically, but instead of it being in a box in front of the cage, it's just a giant circle. And it's either a 2v2, 1v1, or a 3v3 ground ball. And as soon as you pick up the ball, you get 2 points if you stay within the circle and throw a pass to your teammate, or if you run out the opposing team's side, um, you get 1 point basically, right? But you have to basically run through a brick wall of like all these guys that if you try to run through their side, they're just going to jack you up. But that's like the drill where I have the most like nightmares of, but also like the best memories of all time, where it's just
Oh,
like dudes fighting each other, scrapping.
it's
Yeah.
called pressure cooker.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
The housewives will call it an instant pot, though.
Yeah.
Write that down.
Yeah. Wait, so like the guys on the edge, okay, they're not edges of the circles, but on
Yeah.
the outside
Basically,
of the circle, they're like in the drill. It's
yeah.
like so if you're running and you cross over the line, like those guys waiting can like try to like get the
Yeah, so
ball
like
out.
if a ball goes out, like if a ball goes out to one of the sides here, like it's like this is
Yeah.
one team and this is one team,
Oh,
and then
okay. Like
coach is throwing the balls right here.
yeah.
So you basically run out there and then he throws it right at you. But if it goes out of bounds on your side as well, then that's a point for the other team. So you basically have to be like in a hockey stance, ready to keep the ball in. And then
Yeah.
also say like if a guy from this team that's in the drill picks up the ball and they're like running on the outskirts and want to throw a pass, like you can slash them and throw a
Yeah,
check.
like the kids on the outside not
Yeah.
in the drill are like get to play.
They're
Yeah, that's
basically in
fun.
the drill. Yeah. You can do whatever you
Yeah.
want within
Yeah, we're
reason.
gonna call it instant pot in Minnesota.
I like it.
Uh, yeah, no, that sounds incredible. And you know, I think kind of leading in then, like you obviously did great in college. You adapted, you started, scored a lot of goals, played a lot of games. You know, 60 games, like that's a lot. That's a lot of games to play in a college career. And you know, you avoided any serious injuries and were able to just play all 4 years. But you know, then you go into the PLL. So now it's another level, another jump. And talk about that experience because obviously that's even more unique than going
Yeah.
Division I is being someone that can play professional lacrosse.
Yeah, we didn't grow up with like the PLL. Was this on your, when did this, let's start from the beginning. When did the PLL, obviously it's been on your radar, like it's been
Yeah.
around for a few years, but when did playing in the PLL even get on your radar?
That
Yeah.
was my
So,
question. And like, how did the conversation with your parents go of just like, hey, they go to play professional lacrosse, like instead of get a job? I don't know. Like it
yeah.
is kind of bizarre. Like, did it happen one day or yeah, tell us more.
Yeah, so the MLL obviously was before the PLL, and that's probably what you guys are a little bit more familiar with. But um, there was like 1 or 2 years, I want to say, where those two things were basically still being played. So it was like a competitive league, essentially. But as soon as the PLL started, it was like obviously which way do you want to go? Because it was basically all the players, I think, released like their team info with like Snapchat Bitmojis, which was like, all right, this is a little bit weird. And the ML is a little bit more structured, right? But slowly, as those 2 years had advanced, it was basically more and more evident that the PLL was probably going to be the way to go. And obviously, I think that's like every little kid's dream is to play a professional sport at any level. So as soon as I kind of went all in on lacrosse in high school, that was always on my radar. So that's like timing wise. Um, that basically answers that. So I don't know. As soon as I got to college and like talking to my parents, like, well, I don't know, the draft is obviously very hard, especially in this last draft class. Like the amount of talent with COVID and people fifth yearing is absolutely insane. So I obviously wasn't drafted because there's 8 teams, 4 rounds, so basically not a lot of picks at all in that draft. But there's a supplemental draft afterwards that wasn't aired, and that's how I had gotten picked up by the Archers. But in conversations, it was, I don't know, talking to Coach Torpy. He's very connected in lacrosse world, and it was basically just like, hey, do you have any interest in playing box or field professionally? I was like, yeah, of course, if I can make it work. And basically, I had put together like a little highlight tape, me and my like social media coordinator at High Point. And basically, Coach Torpy just fired that off to all the coaches that he knew, and just kind of had conversations about, I think this kid could play in the league. You guys should take a look at him. Here's his phone number if you want to reach out and talk to him, et cetera, et cetera. I had never talked to anyone, but I mean, he's a very connected guy. So in regard to family and telling them about like I want to do this, I think it was always kind of known. And obviously like talking with my brothers and them being big in lacrosse, like they always kind of knew it was like my number one goal to play professionally. And now with the PLL, like it's a little bit more like viable. It makes sense if you want to do that money wise. And then also I think with that being basically steady growth each year now on top of each other, obviously it makes your argument a little bit stronger. But in talking to my family, there was the draft the night or basically like a week before I had left to drive home from High Point, and I was on my way back to home with like my U-Haul trailer and literally everything I've ever gotten at High Point for college. And I had gotten a call from Coach Bates, and it's just like, hey, we picked you up in the supplemental draft. You're going to be a Utah Archer. And I was like, basically 10 hours from home in Indiana. I was like, holy shit, like this is awesome. Thank you so much. Obviously, I had a loss for words, but all I can really say is thank you. And I'm stoked, and hit the ground running, got to training camp, and the rest is kind of history.
You just like skirt to Utah? Like, did you go home and back? So do you live in Utah now? I love
No,
Utah.
no, I don't. So yeah, their whole idea with it is to slowly but surely have people like full time. So I'm not even like full time right now.
Oh, okay. That's the best.
In kind of a job search, which is
Yeah,
not the funnest thing in the world, but we'll figure it out. It's kind of
Hey, what do you major in? There's a lot of good listeners. You know, network
yeah.
yourself. What do you major in? What are you
You
looking
went to
for?
Prime. You got the skills.
Yeah, no, I majored in finance, so want to do something in finance, banking. Hopefully, bonds is probably the biggest thing I'm interested in, whether it's
Mac loves finance.
municipal bonds or corporate bonds. But I feel like there's a big world in that stuff.
Big bond guy. Cool.
Yeah. But no, I live in St. Louis Park right now. My lease is up in November, so I'm kind of trying to figure out where I'm going to go after this.
Utah.
Depends on jobs and all that. I mean, if there's a great job in Utah, I might as well take it. But the way it's structured right now is that you don't need to live in market.
Oh,
And I
that's
like
cool.
that a lot, just because obviously you have the freedom of having your day job or doing whatever you want. There's a lot of guys that work a regular job. There's a lot of guys that play box and field, but it's kind of like pick your poison between those two things.
Did you get picked up by a box team? I thought you may have.
Yeah, I'd gotten drafted by Vegas.
Not a big deal. That's where you should move.
Yeah, that's where you should move.
Yeah. Hoping it all works out. I mean, I have one like actual potential job and interview process coming up here shortly. So depending on
Is
how
it a
that,
happy hour?
what?
I never really did the whole corporate world interview things, but I hear a lot of interviews are just happy hours.
It is not a happy hour. I wish it
Okay.
was.
So
That's
it's a
like
legit job.
That's like, yeah, no, that's like interview 2, 3, or 4.
You had a lot of interviews that were strictly happy hours.
You don't start with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of, and you were kind of starting on it. You know, what is the day in the life of a PLL player? You know, like obviously growing up, it's like, oh, NFL, you know, that's all that they do. You know, NHL, that's all that they do. You know, PLL still in their early stages. It's probably a lot like how the NFL used to be a long time ago in the you know, in their early stages. You know, what's day in life of the PLL? Are you planning on playing in the NLL too, or where are you at in that process?
Yeah. So well, after training camp, once I knew I had made the 25-man roster, obviously the emotions were really high, and it's like, all right, like this is awesome. Completed my dream, basically made the roster. Like I'll be playing hopefully every weekend, right? But then kind of reality sets in, and being drafted to Utah, especially, it's like that's one of the deepest rosters in the PLL, in my opinion. And especially at the attack spot, like you're not really going to be playing what you're used to unless you're one of the number one picks in the draft, right? Like, I mean, we even saw Brennan O'Neill playing midfield the first couple games because they're trying to figure everything out, right? So in reality, it's like you kind of don't know which direction it's going to go. And Coach Torpy had laid that out to me pretty honestly. Like with his professional lacrosse career, he was kind of calling coaches, like actively looking at the injury, like waiver lines and all that stuff back in the day for box and field. But he said, like, if this spot doesn't work out or if you don't make the 25-man roster, like, keep on top of basically people getting injured because that's a huge thing, and people popping in and out of the lineups. The way it works is there's a 25-man roster, which basically those are like the players they have like the rights to. There's an injury roster and then like a pup roster, which is like player unable to play. Um, but if you're not on the 19-man roster, or the 21-man roster for that game weekend, the 19 obviously is who plays in the game, and then the 21, the other two on top of the 19 are like the emergency reserve players. So like in the previous years, they had traveled to the games as well and just been on the sidelines. But this year, it was basically you don't travel, and the practice before your guys' game that day before, if a player gets hurt, you guys can basically get called up. You're on a flight that night and you're playing in the game tomorrow. But realistically, day in the life, I had an internship this summer. So it was basically wake up, go to my internship, get all that stuff done. And then as soon as I got out of that, it would be either shoot or lift. Just kind of keep the stick in my hands, keep the weights on me, basically. That and then running, I would mix in every once in a while. But as like you get the first couple weeks and it's like, all right, like I'm still 100% like I'm looking forward to playing and all that stuff. And then as I really didn't get an opportunity, obviously like overall, I'm like, this is significantly less fun because obviously I'm on the roster. This is great. Like this is my dream come true, but it's one thing to be on the roster and it's one thing to play. And that was when I haven't really my freshman year I didn't play in every game. So that was when I got hit with like my first real like dose of like, all right, like this league is a lot more competitive and a lot more brutal than I had A, imagined it to be, and B, what I had been used to. So not really getting the call and kind of just being trusted to still get everything I needed to get done like I was playing in every single game was a little bit harder for me to deal with, but for the most part, I think I did a great job of A, getting my shots up, keeping in great shape, and then also just kind of trying to focus on what's right ahead of me. But then initially when I had gotten that call, it was I had felt like I was the happiest guy in the world. I was at my internship and about to leave, and I was the only one in the office, thank God, because I was pretty fired up. But yeah, to get the ability to play in Utah in the home venue, and obviously a lot of the guys had told me before, like that was the best venue they had played in all year. Just with overall people there, like there really wasn't a seat that was open. And there was people standing around the field, which was great. And it really felt like a home game. Like in overtime, Sis had won the face off, and you like basically felt like the energy from the crowd, which was they had told me it wasn't really comparable in any other home state, which was sweet.
Yeah, that's so cool that you got that experience, and then you were able to you got the call up, you got on the roster, but it wasn't a one and done. You made an impact. We talked about your behind the back goal and your overtime winner. Obviously did enough for them to say, "Hey, we're going to keep you up with the squad," and got to ride it out to a championship. So that's super cool. Congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment, and like really like you I don't know how much you are plugged into social media and stuff, but like you made a huge impact in Minnesota lacrosse. Like everybody was talking about that. Like to see a Minnesota guy go out with the best of the best, make an impact on the team, and take that team to a championship in lacrosse is something that I think a lot of people were super proud of. So like just wanted to say that to you, like everybody was sharing it and pumped, and that really put Minnesota on the map. So that's awesome that you were ready to go and you got the call.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was definitely not easy the whole, weeks leading up to playing, but I there was some potential of me playing in Minnesota when we were here. And obviously wanted that to happen. I assumed I kind of would just with being from the venue and all that stuff. But in reality, like coach's job is not easy at all. And for them to, take one thing out at a certain time and put something else in, it could go south at any moment. And I mean, in hindsight, like if I would have played in Minnesota, that was kind of a game where we were off for the most part. It felt a little bit off, whether it was flow of the offense or just game in general. If I would have played in that game, like who knows if that would have been my only shot, if I wouldn't have done much. So I mean, obviously I'm very happy with how it all played out. And I had joked with like my brother, my family members, just like I basically have done everything I have dreamed of doing in 3 games, 4 weekends. So it's pretty crazy to think about that. But as well as like Minnesota and the support of basically everyone who had helped me get here, obviously I couldn't be more thankful. And as soon as the game was over, that was the most amount of Instagram or any social media and text that I had gotten from people that I haven't talked to in who knows how many years, right? Or like I have people like family members reaching out, and it's awesome, obviously, and it makes whatever time I had to wait makes it that much sweeter now. So thank you guys. Yeah.
Couple like rapid fire questions before we wrap up here. Where's your favorite place to play? I had in the NCAA, but
Yeah.
it could be in the PLL too, or
Yeah.
in Minnesota State High School League. I don't know. Where's your favorite place to play?
I'd say in Minnesota, I like playing at Minnetonka because typically when we played there, it would be in state tournament, and we always played well on that field. Least favorite would probably be Chanhassen for obvious reasons. I lost 3 games there, and we didn't do much losing in my high school career. So Chanhassen, that place sucks. But collegiately, I mean, obviously at High Point, it makes your life a lot easier when you're playing at home, by any means. But collegiately, I'd say playing in the Dome this past year was awesome. I mean, you don't really think of it as like a giant stadium and arena like that. And when you actually like are walking around in there, it feels like crazy. Like it doesn't really feel like a lacrosse, like like there's typically a lacrosse and soccer stadiums that are like, all right, this is fit for that.
Yeah.
UNC is just a whole nother piece. Like it's awesome. As well as UNC probably had the nicest lacrosse field I had ever played on. The grass there is awesome. And it just feels like it's always packed with seating, obviously being a little bit limited, but there's like a upper seating and walkway, which is super nice. But a lot of good stadiums. And then I'd say professionally, I mean, Utah is probably the best place. I mean, overall fan wise, I think that helps. But obviously, like playing lacrosse and seeing mountains in the background, it's like a little bit different than anything else I had experienced. And then also, like, I joke about it, but I play with my buddies in Vail every year, and those fields are sick. Like, if they had like an actual stadium in Vail where you're like in the mountain, basically, I think that would be the best place to play, hands down. But that's
I've been to that tournament, and it's so fun.
it's
It's so
awesome.
fun.
It's the best. It's the best.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And like you're right, the fields are like you could reach out and just like touch a mountain.
It feels like it, but they're just so far. But you're like,
Yep.
you're right there.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
They do a good job with that.
Who's the best defender you've had to go up against?
In high school, Quentin Matsui. I forget if he was guarding me or not my junior year, but we played them every year. My freshman year, it was a lot. Like everybody was just so much bigger. So I think everybody I went up against was just terrifying. But Quentin Matsui, obviously, I think is the best defender to ever come out of Minnesota. And to go against him at any level, whether it's a one-on-one or, playing against him off ball or just in team offense and team defense, I think he was the cream of the crop in Minnesota. having to go against Seamus and Jack Wrigley when he was here in practice were big. And then Elliot Ishii, I think he's a little bit slept on. I think he was another one that was really good in Minnesota high school lacrosse. A couple other, I mean, college level, I think Grant Amon, I played with him for 4 years at High Point, and he was just a dog. Like he would throw the meanest checks and he wouldn't think twice about it. Um, Obviously at the collegiate level, like us playing against the top schools every single year. I mean, there's defenders from Duke, there's Virginia, every other team. Syracuse was obviously a great defense this past year, but I think when you get to the next level, it's like every single team you go against, like especially my junior, my senior year, I was drawing the number one poll. So any one of those matchups was really hard. Like we had scrimmaged Marquette my junior year, and I went up against Mason Woodward and obviously their defense, and they were really good. Obviously, a little bit like I didn't know that much about Marquette defense at the time, so that was a little bit of a wake up call. Um, but in the professional level, obviously everything's amplified as well. I'd say the scariest defender I hands down would ever not want to play against in the world is Graham Hosick. Um, I'm very happy he's on our team and not the other teams because watching anybody dodge against that guy and then the rest of the poles we have on our squad, it just seems very unenjoyable.
He
So,
was a Lindenwood guy, right?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yep,
Yeah.
yeah. It's Drew Peterson as well. Played with him in college. He coaches for Benilde right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, we had joked about like I don't know past times, but yeah, no, Graham is it's crazy because he's like one of the nicest guys ever, and he also is just terrifying. Like I would never want to do anything wrong to that guy.
Yeah. Uh, you play for Utah Archers, and everybody talks about Tom Schreiber. How good is he?
Yeah, he's great. I mean, he's literally the best player I've played with ever.
Yeah.
I in training camp, obviously getting the chance to meet him and basically all the other great guys is like dream come true, and it sounds crazy and like even thinking about it like when I was younger like watching basically everyone on this roster as I grew up, especially Tom, Ryan, like all the older guys, Trey, like wow, like these guys are basically like idols to a certain extent, and being able to meet them at training camp and have all of the interactions be like overwhelmingly positive and all these people basically just to like fulfill every thought I had initially thought of them is I think it's second to none. But with Tom, like as soon as you got there, like you knew he was the guy. And he's one of the nicest guys I've met off the field and one of the most genuine people, which I think a lot of people say that about him, which is I mean, couldn't be more true. But in training camp that weekend, the first weekend in Albany, he was like warming up on the turf and I just like had my stick in my hands, picking up balls or whatever. And he was just like, all right, like play catch me really quick. And he was just throwing like crazy underhand passes with both hands. And just his passes are just so hard where like they basically come off like a shot. So you have to feel kind of like a goalie to a certain extent and like receive the pass, make sure you handle it and then shoot it. But I remember like catching his pass and be like, I have no idea where this guy's throwing the ball right now. Which is funny.
Yeah, something we talk about, and not just us, but like on the college football side of things, something that happens in college, maybe the pros, will start adapting. Something the pros start doing, college will start adapting. And then high school is just looking up and trying to take things from
Yeah.
above them. You kind of coming from pros and college over the last kind of year. What are some, schemes, tendencies, overall trends that are happening at the higher levels that, kind of us at the high school level, youth levels, what are you guys doing up there that, maybe we should pay attention to, and that, maybe you think is going to trickle down from some of those higher levels?
Yeah, I think the most expert level and like the top level thing that I'd noticed, which is extremely simple, but in the PLL, like the 32-second shot clocks off of a face off and especially 52 off of a save, you're really only getting 30 to 20 seconds of offense. So if you're the one midi, you basically have to sprint directly onto the field and try to get the pole and bury the pole. So like with Grant and Tom, those were the two biggest pole matchups we had. So with Tom going down later in the season, I think Dyson Williams and Ryan Ambler did the best job of it. But basically, if they were the one midi, they would sprint directly onto the field as hard as possible, right to the top of the crease, and try to get the LSM obviously to cover them instead of Grant and Tom and other Dodgers that are on the field. So I think that's like the most easily overlooked thing is getting on the field hard. It's a little bit harder with high school players because you guys don't have a shot clock. And I think that the sooner Minnesota can get a shot clock at every single field, it's going to do great things for the sport. Because I think that's where obviously speed of the game speeds up. It forces players to have a little bit better stick skills and kind of an understanding of offense and defensive principles. Where right now it's just kind of like, all right, we can take our time getting on the field. I think another thing that gets overlooked is just being able to play both handed. I think anybody who can catch and throw with both hand at full speed is obviously going to make bigger jumps than other players are. And that just kind of comes down to like overall love of the game and willingness to, put in extra hours of work. Because you can go to practice and do all this stuff, but if you're not seriously putting in hours outside of practice, you're really not going to get exponentially better.
How much did that just piss off like a quarter of DTA Nation, Ted?
Yeah.
Working on both hands.
Yeah, working on both hands, and the fact that you can attack the goal immediately when you get the ball across the midline, and you don't have to get it around 3 times.
Yeah, that pissed off the other 75% of DTA Nation. No, I love it. I love it. I love both points. That's no, it's good stuff. And since I picked off Ted kind of mid question, we kind of every guest that we have, we ask, kind of what is your alley? I can kind of play on words there. You're a listener, so you know what it is. But for any new listeners, this could be something you're passionate about or focusing on right now. Maybe it's a this month thing, this year thing. Maybe it's a lifelong thing. It can be on the field, off the field. You can kind of run with it any way you want. So yeah, what is your alley?
Yeah, I'd say one of the things I kind of adopted more in college than my younger life, but kind of just taking the aspect of getting 1% better every single day. You don't have to make a giant leap, so to say, one day and then fall off in your consistency level. So I think putting in any amount of work every single day is a lot more benefit than putting in a bunch of work one day and then, letting yourself slack the rest of the week. So get 1% better each day. And you kind of just stack little dubs on top of little dubs, and they kind of accumulate to big ones. So,
have you heard of 75 hard?
I have, yeah.
I feel like you would really like doing that. I mean, no one really likes doing it.
I've thought about
I feel
it.
like that would kind of go with your mantra there.
Yeah, no, I definitely should.
Or not, but it's like, yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is.
Long time.
But it's that. It kind of is that whole adaptation, though. What's that?
Yeah, I don't want to start something and then you know what I mean, like not go through with it as well.
Yeah,
I had seen like a 75 soft, which is like a little bit easier version of it. I've been thinking about doing that, but I had a buddy at school who did it, and he's like the most disciplined person I'd ever met in my entire life, Davis Whiting, and
shout out Davis.
Seeing him struggle with it, it's like I don't know how I would deal with it, but I definitely am guilty of it myself too, like letting some days slip, but for the most part, as I get older, you kind of understand like consistency over, big jumps is kind of more key.
You could always get the boys together and run pressure cooker if you wanted to.
Yeah.
A couple reps, just a couple reps pressure cooker. No, Jack, thank you for coming on. Heck of a career thus far. Even though you said, you've achieved everything that you wanted to achieve, there's still a lot more for you. You can run it back with the boys this upcoming year. Hopefully we see you on the floor in the NLL doing some box. But thank you for coming on and giving us your time. And I think DTA Nation is going to love hearing from you.
Thank you guys again for having me.
For sure.
Thanks.
Have a good night, and we'll talk to you soon.
You as well.
And thank you for Vano, they call him.
Vano, they call him.
Thank you for Vano to come down the alley. One of the top players to come out of Minnesota. Had a fantastic career at BSM, as you heard. You probably got robbed of a championship. They were definitely they were in the running year in year out. And his senior class there They had a squad, but he didn't let that stop him. Had a great career at the collegiate level, and now winning championships at the pro level. So I hope he makes that. We didn't talk a lot of box, but that'd be pretty sweet if he made that NLL roster. And I'm happy our friends over at Old Southern Barbecue are gonna be riding with us all season long.
Yeah, it's they truly do help us bring this show to you. So thank you to them. And whether you're going to one of their locations, taking out catering, an event, stocking up on rubs, Old Southern has all of your barbecue needs covered. Until next time, down the alley nation. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the flip side.